If there's ever any doubt that Disney has no respect for Star Wars or its lore or even its fan base for that matter, just check out this interview right here that Bound in the Comics is reporting on. So Obi-Wan director Deborah Chow says her advice for future Star Wars directors is, quote, to not get hung up on the Star Wars of it all. See, I mean, you would think for a director of a franchise like this or projects like this involving Star Wars with this huge canon and a huge fan base to it behind it, you would think like you would have to redo your research. I mean, if I was in charge of something like this, that would be my advice, is do your research and ask a lot of questions for people who know what they're talking about, because there's people online and everywhere, fans of this are going to start noticing things if there's inconsistencies, especially when all these worlds are built off of each other. You can't just openly contradict them. But apparently she says, just don't worry about that. I mean, for the most part, I can understand a certain point, because she does kind of give an idea like, well, there's a lot to it. So just try to ignore that and understand that this is a human story with characters and things like that. So, I mean, if the most favorable interpretation of this is simply saying like, yeah, she just wanted to try to take a step back and just not get overwhelmed by it, tell that the new directors, and fine, that could be a thing. But that's not what the case is with this one too, because she also goes on to say that she understood that Obi-Wan's role in this era of his life was literally to be on Tatooine and look after Luke. But they said that she didn't want to do that kind of a story. She wanted to do more with it, and that's why they introduced Darth Vader and why they have to have that rematch of theirs, because she thought that would have been a cool thing to have in this, even though it's so stupid to actually have them fight during this era of Obi-Wan. It's more impactful in A New Hope, when the first time they see each other on the Death Star there, the only other time they saw each other was on Mustafar at the end of Revenge of the Sith. I mean, it really cheapens that reunion right there when you know that they've actually fought each other a couple extra times before this. And also just bringing in a young Princess Leia and introducing her to Obi-Wan was such a messy thing, because there was no indication that she actually knew him. I mean, in the original movie, going back to that again, she never sends that message to Obi-Wan with the message like, hey, remember when you helped me as a little girl? Or no, she said like, you fought with my father in the Clone Wars. Like, she indicates that she had no connection with him whatsoever. It was her father's connection, and that's why she's reaching out to him. So by doing this kind of things, just shoehorning their messages, they're just trying to, just break the canon that they have. And they try to say like, oh, well, we knew you're going to break canon in some way, so we just have to swing for the fence. No, you're not going to break canon. There's actually fan films online right now of Obi-Wan on Tatooine that aren't breaking the canon right now. And they could have told stories without doing that, but instead they just decided to push their own message. And the thing is, they knew this really wasn't going to work, so they had to preemptively try to get in front of it right now. And that's why we also heard like messaging like, oh, like there's been racist attacks on Moses Ingram before the show even came out, as if Star Wars fans actually had a problem with black characters. I mean, if you look at their history right now, look at, they had a ton of black characters and no one actually cared about it. The only people who seem to have a problem with black characters in Star Wars is probably Disney Star Wars, with the way they try to shrink Finn on the Chinese poster, because they didn't want to offend the Chinese market or anything like that for some reason. So, I mean, don't give us that it was it was fan backlash on Moses Ingram's casting. If anything, I mean, probably this Disney's marketing department created those Twitter accounts or whatever just so they can point to something as an example, because there was no prominent people actually complaining about a black character in the movie or in the show. Excuse me. But anyway, look at what happened as a result of this. I mean, a 62% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, like, okay, that's not the worst thing possible. But for the most part, I mean, you got to know that there's a lot of review bombing positively going on with this. And even then, that's still a pretty mediocre score for what is essentially a Star Wars TV show starring Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, this should have been something that everyone just loved. Instead, it just sunk flat. And as a result, you're not even getting a second season of this, or at least there's no conclusive news about whether there's a second season. Supposedly Ewan McGregor is begging the studio to try to actually get a second season of this, but as it stands, no one watches it, and so no one wants it. I mean, yeah, they're going to try to bring up numbers and say that this show was a success, but in all honesty, if it was a success, we'd have seen a second season greenlit by now. But no, they're just going to say that they did good and pat themselves on the back and then quietly move on and hope that you forget about this, like what pretty much everyone else did. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do you think this is just typical of a Star Wars director in Disney Star Wars era, that they just have no love for the fan base or even the canon, so they just want to use it as a platform to tell their own stories? Or do you think that there's more to it than that? Let me know. And if you like this video, make sure you click the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.